Hello, and welcome to the Early American Brass Band Podcast. I'm Chris Troiano, joined always by Stephen Canastrisi.
Hello.
This is episode 44, and today we're speaking with Jim Ludlam. Jim is the founder and the leader of the Fort Delaware Cornet Band. He's also involved with the P-Patch Brass Quintet and Recycled Brass Tuba Quartet. He often gives presentations titled Sounds of the Past, and he is the recent author of a book titled The History of Community Bands in Salem County, New Jersey. So we're super thankful for having Jim on the show today, for taking the time to speak with us, and we're really looking forward to sharing this conversation with all of you today.
Yeah, very fun to record, and we'll just roll the tape now, I guess.
Thank you so much, Jim Ludlam, for coming on to the Early American Brass Band Podcast. Thank you so much. How are you doing today?
I'm good. How are you doing?
Yeah, we're doing great. Thanks for taking time out of your Friday morning, almost afternoon, to speak with us. We're super excited to talk to you about your book, your research, and your experience in early brass bands. Maybe we could talk a little bit first about your musical upbringing and what kind of brought you into the field where we are today. So can you maybe talk to that a little bit?
Sure. My current vocation right now is I'm retiring, early retirement, but I've been a band director, high school band director for the past 24 years. Got my Bachelor of Music from Rowan University in Glassboro, New Jersey. Done an awful lot of playing around with brass, orchestra, all those kinds of things. And just been really involved with the whole education thing, which is kind of what got me, well, just to jump ahead a little bit, that's kind of what we enjoy doing with this Fort Delaware Cornet Band. It's more than just, playing concerts as they were, but we like to educate, the audiences that we're in front of. So the thing is, I guess music education has been my A1 priority for the past 24 years.
Mm-hmm. With your background in education and playing music, this idea of early bands, early brass bands, the 19th century, Civil War, all those things, are these interests that kind of developed over time as an interest as an educator, or is it something that you kind of fell into later?
I guess it was kind of later. Actually, I started off, but believe it or not, it was not that anybody's ever a fan of a war, but like my interest laid more with like the Revolutionary War period of the United States. And I happen to be, a son of the American Revolution, and I take care of a family cemetery plot, a little cemetery, which has all the ancestors that fought in the Revolutionary War down in Cape May, New Jersey. So that's where it all, like, I have like this huge interest in history. Civil War, I never really gave much thought about. I was kind of like, they didn't found America. This is where my roots are in the American Revolution. And then when I was teaching, one of the student teachers for the high school choir teacher, she came. I met her and she said, look, there's a Civil War brass band that plays out of Glassboro, New Jersey, which is half an hour from where I live. And I was like, I don't know. That sounds kind of like square. I don't know if I want to do that or whatever, So she said, no, come on out. And I love playing the tuba. So I said, it's another night out. I'll go check it out. So I went out to the rehearsal, and I brought my double C, which is my normal horn that I play on. I usually play on C tuba. And I went out, and I left it in my car because I was like, do they have horns for people to play? And she said, yeah, they have extra horns, this, that, and the other. I said, well, so I thought to myself, well, you know what? I'm not going to go in and like embarrass myself. I don't know how to play E flat, and I go in. So I went in, and they were super nice. And I was like, I brought my horn out in the car, let me go grab it. They're like, no, here, sit down and play this E flat. It's real easy. They gave the cheat sheet of how you play, add three sharps and play trumpet fingering, just and other things. So, and it was lucky that, being a band director, like my trumpet fingerings were pretty solid. So I was like, okay. So it was a nice learning environment because there was like no stress about it. Everybody was pretty cool. So then I got into it. I was like, well, this is all like cool music. I've never heard any of this kind of stuff, and it still has like this history thing about it. So I said, you know what, I'm going to check this out. So I played with them for a bunch of years.
And which group is this?
This is I don't know if you've heard of, it's the Philadelphia Brigade Band.
Okay, yeah.
Also known as Beck's Band.
Yeah, awesome.
They were with I think it was the 28th Pennsylvania. And there's a weird story there. The band had split up and they became Beck's, and then there's another 28th Pennsylvania band, but they're not the same group anymore.
Both of their websites have like disclaimers that they're not associated with each other.
Exactly. And that's where we get into like the politics of how bands and stuff work. I won't get into that, but there's a story there if you ever wanted to investigate.
Yeah, for sure.
So when I got involved with that, I got online and I loved it. So like, I was totally hooked. Like we did the uniform thing was cool. You got to wear uniforms, just and then I had never been to Gettysburg before, and the band plays there every Remembrance weekend, which I think it's usually falls like near like the third weekend in November. So they, on that Friday night and Saturday night out in Gettysburg during that weekend, they always have these really large balls. One which is run by the Sons of Union Veterans on that Saturday night, and we had an opportunity. It's the first time I'd ever been out there, and like, so we went out, and first of all, I was just amazed to be like, present in history in Gettysburg, out there looking at the monuments and thinking about everything that had gone down there. And I played this ball, and everybody was in period gowns, and it was like, holy, like this was like a whole world, man. Like this was like living in a Star Wars movie. You know what I mean? Like it's a whole nother world. And, it was great. So I loved it. But like it just didn't feel like I wanted it to be like, I had my own ideas, like what I thought musicianship should be. And, I guess we'll talk about it later, but like, my own preference on period horns and, having everybody on a period horn versus mixed. And this other band, they do some of those kinds of things. Like they use mixed, modern and modern and period horns, and that can always be a bear when it comes to intonation and those kinds of things, and plus trying to play a period horn that might not be in the best playing condition, which makes it even harder to keep it in tune, let alone that. So anyway, so I said, I want to try something else. So I got online, and I found Yari through Federal City, and I kind of lied to him. I saw they had this thing, they were going to go play this thing that Ken Burns used to have when it was the 150th anniversary. They were doing like this tour thing that Ken Burns was running. So they would take, I guess you would meet up in Washington, D.C. through his tour company or whatever production he had put together. And then they would like kind of take you to all different historic spots to deal with the Civil War. So they were going to have like this pseudo dance demonstration mini concert and I believe it was, you'd have to ask Yari, but I think it was in the old, it was like a Civil War National Post Office or something. I can't remember exactly what it was, but it's big columns and it looked great. It was that period. So I had messaged him online and said, look, I'm interested in coming down and playing like a real period horn, because I hadn't played a period horn yet at that point. I was playing like this early 1900s E-flat tuba, which wasn't quite, you know what I mean? I was like, I'd love to play like this over the shoulder thing or whatever. And he messaged me back. He's like, look, I see you're a band director. We're looking for a tenor horn player for this show. And I was like, oh, I can do that. Now I don't play tenor from, anything, but so I kind of like fudged my way in and went down, and I did fairly well, I think. And so played the concert and got hooked up with the band and played with them for several years. They eventually playing down the E-flat horn, the E-flat tuba. And so like there was like phase two of like eye opening of like, okay, this is really how it's supposed to be. Like these guys are all serious players. We're all playing on, period instruments and playing them well,
Mm-hmm.
and playing in these phenomenal venues
Mm-hmm.
that are meaningful, and
Mhm.
so at that point, that was still quite a drive. So any kind of jobs we were doing, it was usually like Virginia and South. So anything like to do a job with them would be like a minimum of like a 2 hour drive. And then like some were like 4 hour drives when we were
Yeah.
playing down in like Southern Virginia and things like that.
Mm-hmm.
So I said, you know what? I want to start something I see the template here of what Yari had done with Federal City. I said, I want to do something like that, but closer to here that has that same kind of quality to it. Um, so I've been over to Fort Delaware, which is from where I live. Um, it's a boat ride over, but it's about 20 minutes to get to the dock and then
Mm-hmm.
ride over to the fort. And a friend of mine and my wife, we were so like trying out like this whole like Civil War hobby thing. So we had music was cool. We were doing it. But I already had that part of my life. So I said, you know what, I'm going to try like to do like this real reenactment thing. Like I'm going to, you know, they
Mm-hmm.
call him, instead of being a tutor, I was going to become a shooter. You know what I mean? I
Yeah.
was going to carry the gun instead of toot the horn. So I said, this is cool. I went over to like this. It was like they call them School of the Soldier. I don't know if you're familiar with that. And
Mm-hmm.
it, basically what it is like if you it's what they do is they teach you like how to carry your gun, how to fire your gun, how to take care of your gun, how to march, this, that, and the other thing. So
Mm-hmm.
we went over to Fort Delaware, and it was cool, but it was like kind of like I was forcing it, like, nah, I don't think I really want to do this. But then when I was over there and talking to the guys there, they said, and they knew I was a musician. They said, did you know that there was a band station here at the fort? I said, you're kidding me. No, I didn't know that. So that's where I came with the idea. Well, if I want to do something locally, and this is right across, across the river, why not do that? So I started doing research with the Fort Delaware Cornet Band, found out that they had followed just like you find out with community bands, like they follow their, a lot of the community bands just like joined up with their local militia or whatever and went into the
Mhm.
war. Same thing happened over there. They were
Yeah.
out of Pittsburgh, um, Battery G, when they all went out to the fort, their band went with them. So these guys from Pittsburgh area, they came over and did their own thing. So I said, we can do that. Or, other guys do this. So that was like where it all kind of started. And then I just kind of like cherry picked some guys from Federal City that, that wanted other opportunities to play. And plus being a band director, I knew a lot of pretty, pretty good musicians that maybe were interested in history. And, and we started up our own thing. And that's been, I guess, what, 8, 9 years ago. We've been
That's
trying to do
awesome.
it, the right way, which, I can't give enough props to, Yari for giving me that opportunity to come and play with Federal for all those years and see how it's really, I mean, he's an encyclopedia of
Yeah.
information,
Mm-hmm.
about anything, not only about writing the music, but, playing it and appropriate ways. And
Mhm.
so
Yeah. Yeah. Definitely.
I kind of gave you the whole thing there about how
No,
we
that
came about, but
Yeah.
that's that was the genesis of how we started this Fort Delaware thing.
yeah,
Mhm.
that's awesome. I'm curious. Not something that we've really dove into before, but I'm curious. Any visual impression aside, and maybe even venue location aside, and maybe to a lesser extent instrument aside, what was it about that first exposure to playing this music with that first band that you played with hooked you in terms of the music? Because I think sometimes people listen to recordings or listen to other bands or know of the music from like the background of Ken Burns or something,
Mm-hmm.
and some people don't get it. And having played that music, even not on the correct instrument, at the time, not a
Right.
19th century instrument, what about it hooked you and made you become interested in that type of repertoire?
Um, I guess looking back on it, I mean, I'm a huge fan of John Philip Sousa. Like he's one of like my like hero guys. Like he just like I just love those old marches. And these were, anytime we would get into playing like these quick steps that I had never heard before, or even, I don't even know at that point if I'd ever heard the term quick step.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And even though it wasn't always like the best quality of sound, like when we played things like, trying to think, there was one that they were doing that was one of these Hazelton charts. It's called Down in a Coal Mine. It's just like a great chart, but like you never hear it anywhere. Like this is great music that no one, like people just aren't exposed to unless they're in this hobby. So I guess it must have caught my ear, and I just, because then the next thing I knew, like that's all I was doing. Like that's like I'm the kind of guy, like I'm like all or nothing. Like I'll go all in like immediately. So like as soon as we played, I was trying to find any kind of recordings I could of any of this kind of music. So it was like America's Brass Band, there's a great, it's not the Yankee Brass Band that plays all the time, but there's a Yankee Brass CD. And then
Serenade Band.
Yes, that's exactly right. You know the one I'm talking about, like all these great things. So then I just started listening, just kind of like started steamrolling. And then I was like, I got to get all in. So I'm like looking for instruments. So it just all went, from all or nothing. So I guess it had to be like that whole pre John Philip Sousa thing. Like I just kind of like fell in love with it to see like where he eventually got it from.
So it's
like at that point I didn't know that I didn't know enough about Sousa to know that, that he was a kid, what around all those Civil War bands and what an influence that had on him, that music. I didn't know that at the time. But I think and you know what, and beyond the music thing with it, like they were just like a really nice group of people and made it easy to enjoy it and go out and do it. You know what I mean? I don't know if playing with one of these higher caliber bands, if that's your first impression, that can be a little intimidating. You know what I mean? So maybe that's a turn off a little bit sometimes, because you're not really, you're not free to be me. You know what I mean? You kind of are trying to put on airs or do whatever you do as a musician in that group, listening to hear. This was a nice, comfortable, easy
community
slip into the hobby. You know what I mean? I've been very fortunate in that way, like to have like those, signposts as you go along. Like I think I was where I needed to be at a certain time. It just all worked out.
That's awesome. So the community aspect, in addition to what sounding like the interest of learning of like the historical context behind the bread and butter of what we play and teach in school with the concert band kind of thing, and kind of seeing where that came from.
And,
that's awesome.
And of course, like I later would go on, like they're a great and maybe you came across this in your research, but I mean there are some really fine transcriptions for concert band of some of that stuff that's like that I did with my high school group that's really achievable by high school groups. Like I know we did Freischütz Quickstep. Like there's a great band arrangement of that out that we played for. We went out and did these things, and maybe your listeners aren't aware of, like, as far as like high school band things, and what you do is you take these kids out to these events called like Music in the Parks, where you'll go to like a great adventure. But before you do that, you go to like a local high school near to that park, and you play 3 tunes for like this adjudicating staff. So we took one of these charts out, which was the Freischütz Quickstep, and played it, for a ranking. They say it's not competition, but like underneath it's competition. So we did it for this competition, and the judges were like, "That's cool. I had never heard this before." It was something we were bringing out, like, So I feel like myself being engaged with this hobby also helped me to be a better, music educator, because I know for a fact that unless you're like involved with this hobby like we are as a music teacher, and it's probably that way with anything that music teachers get into, that not everybody's into it, but like I know my kids are getting that exposure because I'm involved with it, whereas normally if I weren't involved with it, my kids would have never known anything about really Civil War music, Civil War era military music anyway. So I mean, I think that also helped me to have another dimension of being a teacher, if that makes sense. you know, and things I could bring to my kids.
Yeah.
That maybe, you know what, they'll go back, you know, and they'll, I have a lot of kids that become music teachers, and they'll be like, you know, my band director did XYZ, and I remember doing that, and I'm going to do it with my kids. So like, it's almost like you're perpetuating, you know, the knowledge. So that like, hopefully, like that's my main concern with this hobby is like, I would hate to see this music just kind of fade away. Like if it's not like for what you guys are doing or what, you know, a lot of the bands you talk to are doing like this, I really do in my heart of heart believe like that this music would be, it would be forgotten. I mean, everybody's going to know Dixie, everybody's going to know Battle Hymn of the Republic, but you know, those are like the, or what everybody just, you know, the gold standards, but there are a lot of other gold standards that people just don't know about. And I think that if we didn't do it, I really do feel like this music would just fizzle and fade away to antiquity. You know, reading, there's this great book, I can't remember, it's a recent book within the past couple of years that came out, and I read it, and what the book does, and if I can remember it, I'll email it to you. What it was, you guys probably know what it is, because it was like a book that you wouldn't have to go to a bookstore to buy. Like I think I bought it at Walmart, and it was kind of like the cover, it has like, you know, this antiquated looking American flag cover to it. It was like American music through war or something. I can't remember what it was, but it kind of, it starts off like with you know, Revolutionary War, but like there's not a lot in there, and a little bit of Civil War touches, but like it's more like starting specifically like more with like World War II, and then like it really I guess because it's a popular book, you know, for people that would pick it up that aren't necessarily into musicology or whatever, but the book has to do with a lot of like the Vietnam War era music all the way up through where we are politically, like, you know, with our well, it ended with the Trump presidency, so like it hadn't, the election hadn't happened or anything like that. And a great point, and I don't know what can be done to fix it, and this is kind of out of the context realms of the Civil War, but still has to do with music that pushes the realm politically and people can speak. I mean, you know, a lot of those Civil War tunes were rah-rah for whatever side you were going to be on, or versus anti-slavery, or those kinds of things. I think that after Vietnam, music hasn't really spoken to the politics of the world that we live in. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Like I think that it's become, if it is, it's fringe. Like it's not something you're going to go hear on the radio. Like I think during the 70s, you could have put on the radio and heard these anti-war songs or pro, you know, patriotic songs. Like, and you just don't, the music today does not have that to it. And I think it's important that we look back and say, look, you know, music used to play a very, very important role in telling us what our country was for and against, and what we as a people stood for, or, you know, what certain people stood for. And I think that that's lost in music today. And I think if we don't continue to like push that was a thing, that part of our American history will also be forgotten. That just music in general, regardless of Civil War, but any kind of music, really used to have, you know, it was powerful in telling people, the government, the world, what the United States stood for.
Yeah, it was its own.
That makes sense.
It was its own tool, not just like recreational listening.
Yeah, yeah. It wasn't like they didn't just take a poem and set it to, you know, to music or text and set it to music. It said something.
Yeah.
It's Songs of America, John Meecham and Tim McGraw.
Yeah, I think that's it. And it has like this American flag. It's like the cover.
It's like kind of wooden. Yeah.
Yes. Yep.
John Meecham and Tim McGraw. I do remember hearing about that. Yeah.
It seems like maybe the most recent example of something like that I can think of would be like God Bless the USA during 9/11, but that was like an older song before that. He had written that, I think, in the 80s. and they just reused it or it just became popular again, kind of at 9/11. But that the power of a song, I think I can't really think of any other examples since then.
The one that like now that you said that stands out, because I think even that example would probably not be something like you would hear a lot on the radio. But I remember growing up as a kid in the 80s, like, but like, you know, somebody who still does that is like Bruce Springsteen. Like when he had Born in the USA, you know, he kind of like explains what it was like to you know, to be a blue collar worker in the United States. I mean, that's, to me, like, that's screaming like it's a great screen capture of what America was at that time when that song came out. Like, you know what I mean? Like, I just don't think like I said, unless I'm sure there are singers that do it, but I don't think that commercially it's probably not like a smart thing for like current artists to do, because I just don't think
now we're going down this rabbit hole. The one that comes to mind now is "This Is America" by Childish Gambino. That's all about gun violence and being black in America and stuff. That's oldish now. I don't know, what did that come out, like 5 or 6 years ago?
I think it's more recent than that. I think it was like 2 or 3. But yeah, I remember seeing that music video for the first time. And
well, you know what, and that's a good point. You know, I think now that you say that, I think that maybe like the whole urban music scene, that might be the only place right now where you do hear music about what's going on in the country. You know what I mean? Like there's something, you know, it's meaningful. It's saying something about life, you know, in America from a certain point of view, from a certain perspective.
I know it's happening in other countries too. Like I know, like in 2010, in the Middle East during what they call the Arab Spring, that music was a big part of the Middle East uprisings, like Egypt, like when that was going on, like around 2010. And then right now, or is it in Cuba, that there's a revolt going on? There's a song that's rallying everybody in Cuba.
To the cause.
Something Evita, something in life. I forget exactly what's called. But,
so I just don't know that a lot
music's
of
important.
So
yeah, true. Yeah, very true.
You know, which is I think, you know, getting back to the Civil War thing, I think that's a lot of the music, and that's another reason why it was so important, because I think, you know, especially for abolitionists and things like that, I mean, they did their work through song a lot of times. The Hutchinson family, I don't know if you're familiar with them. You know, they did the tour and went around, and it just doesn't happen anymore. And you know, I don't know. So I think it's important that we keep that part of history going through this whole Civil War music hobby. Although, you know, a lot of the music we play in the bands maybe does not speak to those certain things. It's more like rah-rahs, or, you know, I'm sad because my girl I left behind, you know, those kinds of things of music. But that's still important as well.
And then it gets into the greater conversation too about just teaching history in general. Like the more time that passes, the more history has happened. So like the harder it is to kind of fit stuff within, you know, an academic year to teach everything. It seems like, and there's movements to kind of rectify this to a certain extent, but like, yeah, it seems like if we're talking about the early American band movement, either brass band or early concert band historical movement, we've discussed multiple times on the show how that's essentially neglected in colleges, and that's not talked about at all. If that is to get worked back in, we're probably going to have to budget that time as well, and maybe not spend as much as we would like to, just at least give them like a starting spot, a starting point, to like a jumping off point to maybe learn more about it and expose them to it in the first place. And then the rest is up to them. Maybe.
Right now, I know, you know, being around the music education scene, I know that a lot of like your general music classes, like at least elementary level, they do some, like there's always a unit on When Johnny Comes Marching Home. Like that's like, you know, kids around the world know that, like that's a Civil War song. That like another one like that, you know, that's one of the, you know, the standard bearers of what we do. And I know kids do get exposure to things like that, and Gilmore not so much, but a little bit, like when they talk about composers, but there's not a lot of it, you're right, out there. And I mean, as far as like at the secondary education level, now I don't know many. I know there are at my high school where I teach. My first year there, I did teach a general music class, and I know the teacher that still teaches there, Paula. She teaches it, and she does a great job. That the books that she uses does not really hit on that. It kind of like skips all that and goes to like world music, like what are they listening to in Venezuela, like what or the history of rock, those kinds of things. Like I think not just Civil War, but I mean just Revolutionary War had a lot of great music with it too, and World War One, with that anniversary coming up. Like there's just a lot of things out there which I think you guys are doing a great job of keeping it and attempting to keep it relevant, here on the good old World Wide Web. You know what I mean? That's an easy place to access. Like so if I said to my kids that, so for next week we're going to do something on Civil War music, I need you to go to, and then I would give them your site, pick one of the podcasts and listen to it, and then we're going to discuss it. Like those are things that I think would make a great part of any kind of curriculum as far as music history goes. Or even at the collegiate level, like you guys. I mean, I had to take music styles. I don't know what it's called when you guys were going through it. It was so we would do, I think we had to take 3 semesters of it, and it was it took us all the way back from Gregorian chant all the way up through 12 tone and 21st, well I guess it was 20th century at that point. You know what I mean? But there was nothing on this kind of music where it would have been nothing for our professors just to say, look, here, check this out, go listen to one of their podcasts, pick anyone you want that has interest to you, and come up and you're going to talk in front of the class for 10 minutes on it. I think that's a really worthwhile thing, and hopefully maybe you guys can promote doing stuff like that.
That'd be awesome. We're always excited for the prospects of getting stuff in front of people in different ways and exposing it to everybody. So definitely something we're interested in. It's just if elementary school students are exposed to When Johnny Comes Marching Home and Patrick Gilmore, I know for a fact that the 2 main just general music history textbooks that the majority of colleges uses, they might mention Sousa, they might mention Frederick Fennell and Eastman, but it's like
I've never seen Fennell, but Sousa usually, but
it's like a paragraph or 2. But it's like if anybody's going to be learning about that style and time period of music to inform their education and their performance in the future, you would think it would be at that college level, where you're preparing students for that career, and it's largely not happening. Getting back to your role of preservation and your role in this community with the Fort Delaware Cornet Band, you mentioned that you guys are all on period instruments, right? Because you were kind of modeling yourselves after your experience with Federal City. Yeah. So, are those band owned, or do you expect members of the band to purchase their own?
I own a few of them, but most of the guys that play in the band own their own. The drummers own their own. I think John, our bass drummer, plays on a Cooperman, and then Dan, our snare drummer, he bought a reproduction off of Garmin, who I believe you've had on show, Garmin Bowers, and he comes and plays with our group occasionally too. But he bought that, and then the rest of them we're playing on all originals. And I think the cornet players own theirs, the tenor player owns theirs, and I own the altos and the bass horn.
Okay, there you go.
Yeah,
nice.
Are you guys also on period mouthpieces, or is the makeup of the band, people who have to kind of hop from modern horns for other things to?
This is going to sound like sacrilege. Like I know myself, I play on a modern mouthpiece. Like it's just so much. I do a lot of tuba playing just outside of this, and like it's really, for me to get a quality sound, I put that little trombone mouthpiece thing on, that's the period mouthpiece for the horn for the tuba. I'm like, I can't get any kind of good sound out of it. Maybe if I did like real work on it, like but I abashedly say I don't practice the E flat bass horn all that much.
Yeah.
Luckily, us tuba player guys, like the music is not that difficult.
That's
like
true.
if I were playing the E flat cornet part, then I'd have to shed a bit.
Right.
But anyway, that's me personally. I think in the group, most of the guys, the cornet players are playing, and our tenor player and the alto players, I think they're all playing on period mouthpieces.
Nice. And do you guys have open invitation for anybody that wants to play, or do you have membership restrictions for your band?
We don't, because we keep the group small. And another thing, like I like to look around at what other groups. So when I was playing with Beck's band, anytime that we would have a job proposed to the group, it would always be, oh gosh, I can make it, I can't make it. So when you've got like 20 people to like try to make jobs happen, and if I knew if I was going to be running the job, the band, I didn't want to deal with that. So I keep it small so that I know like I have less people that would have conflicts. So we don't open it up to just anybody to come out and play. And there's like an expectation, like we don't practice. So like maybe we'll do once a year, we'll get together and just read through some charts that we don't normally do. But like you've got to be able to, with the group, you got to be able to play, you got to be able to come in and play it well so that we can just do it for a gig and move on. So we don't, there's a place for people to go and do those kinds of things, to sit in and get that experience. But, and I don't say that with any, speaking negatively of any other band.
Yeah, of course.
Like they're talking down, but like, our group is specifically the same guys we use all the time.
Yeah.
Unless we have an opening or something for a sub, that's the only way that we'll, bring in someone outside.
Yeah.
Is the band, usually one or two on a part, or is that how small you keep it?
Yeah, we keep it. It's like a brass quintet with two percussion. The only thing I double, or that we double, is the E flat cornet part, because that can get a little cumbersome at times. The guys need a rest. So we usually go 2 E flats, 1 alto, 1 tenor / baritone, tuba, and then percussion, a snare.
Yeah, it's funny. I kind of I'm relating everything back to that Francis Johnson book, just because that's what I'm like currently reading. But I was surprised at the size of his group when he was working, in Philadelphia in the first, half of his life. The book was saying like normally when they say like Johnson's band, it was like 5 people. The biggest, group I've seen so far is 10, and that was only for very special occasions. So it's, yeah.
That's why I don't feel too bad about it. Like, because I know when people want like that term band, you immediately think it's like a 20-piece group. We call that, us highfalutin futuristic people, we call it a brass quintet. But back in the day, that was, band was just a group of musicians that got together no matter what the size was, small or large. And, so, it's all what you're, where you're looking at it from as far as what you consider a band.
Yeah, I know during like the colonial period when they had bands of music and stuff, those were, 8 to 10 musicians, and they were bands. So and
I mean, even looking like when I did this book that I did on the local research stuff, I mean, I had a lot of photos in there. These bands were, max maybe a dozen. Some were like 6 to 8. You know what I mean? So it's really not a modern band is a lot bigger, but back in the day, it's just a group of people getting together to do the thing. Like, because if you look at a lot of those old folios from like the Civil War era, it was like can be played with as few as 4 players. You know what I mean? It has a little. So
it's a little bit of like the Salvation Army kind of tradition with it that they're able to kind of mix it.
Yeah, those little green Rubank books with the Christmas carols or whatever.
Yeah, exactly. So with the uniforms of the band, is that owned by you or the band, or does each member have to go out and get their own?
They get their own.
Okay.
I have a few extra jackets for if we need guys to sub or whatever, but the guys, they have bought all of their own uniforms.
Do you guys have multiple impressions? Like, do you have like a civilian and a Union kind of thing, or?
No, we just did the Union Artillery Band, because the Fort Delaware Band was an an artillery band.
Okay, nice.
But we've talked about with like, the political climate, and I've talked to other bands also same thing. Like, I mean, the time may come where if we still want to continue to play more regularly, that maybe it is something that we'll have to consider is going, doing like a serenade band, like calling it like that's what I was called the Fort Delaware Serenade Band, to try to take away any kind of military Civil War, which I hate to do, but if we want to play, or Victorian band, the Fort Delaware Victorian Band or something like that, we've toyed with it, but we haven't jumped on that just yet.
Yeah.
Because that's, some of the guys, they do it because they enjoy the Civil War aspect of it. They may not enjoy playing civilian and and other tunes. They're more, they like to play what we play. And beyond that, it's expensive to go out and outfit everybody up again, with civilian clothes, and then what if you do it and it kind of like tanks and you still end up just doing the Civil War thing more than you would the other. So we've talked about it, but we haven't made that jump yet. But I know some other bands, specifically guys that are doing Confederate bands, that are like, if we want to continue to do this thing, we're going to have to maybe think outside the box and figure out what else we can do to keep playing.
Yeah. With trying to be kind of grounded in the Civil War, with your guys' impression in your band, do you guys do any rep from after 1865, or do you try to do 1865 and prior with music that you guys play?
We try to stay right with 1865, not with, but prior and up to 1865. I'm trying to think. The only thing that we do, which is is taboo amongst some of the guys, once in a while we'll play a Shokin Farewell, which a lot of like the purists are like, oh my God, what are you doing that? I'm like, we do tell them that the tune was like written in the 80s and that it was not for it was not Civil War, but it was Ken Burns loved it and this, that, and the other thing. So when we do it, we either do it as our warm-up before we actually start, because we dig the tune, or if we do it, very rarely do we do it in concert. We do it with like a big asterisk next to it, like, this is not Civil War, don't go and say that, because it's almost like you get to a point where like you're afraid like somebody's gonna record it and put it online, and then like everybody, oh, look at those Farby guys, they didn't even play sports. So
that's what we opened my lecture recital. We opened it with a Shokin Farewell.
It's a great tune.
It's pretty.
I mean,
works well for brass.
So that's the one. That's the one that we do that is not of the period. But other than that, we try to stay strictly within.
So I know like some like the Stratton Military Journal stuff is technically published after the Civil War, but the tunes were likely written, during kind of things. So you guys play Stratton stuff?
We do play Stratton stuff.
Yeah, nice.
So I guess if any of that stuff was afterwards, but I mean, again, a lot of it is like that rah stuff, the marquee kind of, you know what I mean, the stuff.
Yeah, definitely.
Specific to the war.
Yeah, it all fits within the period.
For
sure.
Yeah.
Do you have any notable kind of performances or events that kind of stand out in your guys' run so far that you're particularly proud of, or any fond memories from anything specifically?
Yeah, what I like to do, and what I think the group likes to do, is we love anytime we get a chance to play in Gettysburg, like to where there was like a historical significance to the war, and we get an opportunity to play there. Those are the ones that stand out in my mind. We had done a job, and I can't remember exactly what it was. In Gettysburg, it's the old train station. I don't know if you're familiar with that in Gettysburg. And I think it's where Lincoln got off the train, this, that, and the other thing. And they were having a ceremony. The town, I forget how we got, I think it was through Joel Cribbs that we got the job. The town of Gettysburg was doing this like sister city ceremony with a town or city or village or whatever from Japan. So they had all these, it was like all the town muckety mucks from Gettysburg, and then like all the muckety mucks from this village in Japan. And they were all there, and they did like this, signing of whatever the paper was that declaring that they were now sister cities, and this, that, and the other thing. And it was cool because in one of the museums in town, they had put all this like great, like there were like samurai armor and all this stuff. They were like kind of like juicing up, everything between these two cities. So it was cool. So when we were there, we had a friend of ours, they had asked to have somebody stand, it was like this ceremonial thing to stand guard. So I have this guy, a friend of mine, Sean, that's a Civil War reenactor. So he came and did the thing standing at attention. And next to him was like a guy that they had brought, like, that was in like this traditional samurai armor. And like, it was cool. We had to play the Japanese national anthem on our period instruments. It was like this really whole cool affair, which is like, I'd never been able to do if I wasn't doing like this Civil War band thing. Like, what I mean? I never would have had this opportunity to do something like this. So that's one that sticks out to me. And we got to play. The other one is we're on the Victorian Dance Ensemble. I think that's their name. They had done a DVD on teaching the dances of the Civil War ball. And we got to go and record in the rotunda at out in Harrisburg. That's where they did their video. So we got to do the music for that, and that was kind of cool. That was a neat experience because it was it was a recording experience that we had never done before. Was
that you guys playing while they were dancing, or you did a separate
that was what was kind of weird about it. Like, I don't know if they had really thought everything through, because normally that's what you would think. Like, we would go do our thing separately, and then they would like pipe in their music and they would do their dance to it, so that to make sure everything was like precise. They had us play and recorded us while we were playing them dancing, and they were recording them dancing and us playing at the same time. Like, we had our own set of mics, but like they were off. It was kind of weird because they had us get dressed in our period gear, and then we never appeared on the video. All you did was hear us. So it was kind of like this weird thing. But anyway, it was a cool experience anyway to get to play there and do that with such a great group of dancers.
Yeah, nice. That's pretty cool.
Yeah, and we always and one last one I'll tell you is another Gettysburg thing is we play. I don't know if you're familiar with Prince of Peace Church in Gettysburg. It's a church in Gettysburg that they built after the battle, but it was built it's a memorial church to the Civil War soldiers. So I think it was built like I want to say like 1876 or 1888. Some I looked it up last night because I wanted to tell you, and then I was like, oh, I won't remember. And here it is, I don't remember. Yeah. But so anyway, we play there every Remembrance weekend. We go on that Sunday before everybody's heading out of town from the weekend. We go there and play a church service for them in that historic church, which is cool. And then we put on like a little mini concert afterwards. And it's cool because you get some of the people that are leaving town, but they show up in their, in the Civil War dress, and it's kind of cool. So those are the kind of things that are kind of memorable.
So you did like a recording project, the Hazelton Liberty Brass Band. How did that come about? And where'd you guys get all the music and all that good stuff?
Here's the story. All right, this is a story. So one of the guys that plays in our band plays also with the 28th Pennsylvania Band. And one of the guys that plays with the 28th Pennsylvania Band, his name is Tom Mort. And the story goes, I'm going to give you the real story because it's been so long ago. There was like a cover story because they didn't want to get anybody in trouble, but this was back like in the early 90s that all this happened. So I'll just tell you what happened. So
statute of limitations is passed, so you're good.
That's right. That's right. So a friend of Tom's was, and this was, like I said, early 90s or late 80s. I can't remember, but it's been a while, 30, 40 years ago. He had a friend that did like this whole, you know, sometimes if somebody's moving or whatever, they come in and clean out the house. And I guess maybe it had been I don't know if it was a vacant home or someone had passed or whatever. Mm-hmm. Anyway, the guy went, and in the attic there in this box, he found all this music. Didn't know where, you know, didn't have any clue as to what they were going to chuck it. It was just like trash, but he knew that Tom was a musician. So luckily he called Tom and was like, look, you know, and I think a lot of guys do that. If you have a friend that does that, say, if you ever find anything, let me know before you throw it out. So he called Tom, and lo and behold, it was the complete set. I think it had everything except for some of the percussion stuff. And I don't think it had a piccolo book with it. And it was all the Hazelton stuff. And and so they got it together and they took it back the 28th, and they had somebody kind of put it into like early music notation, like, you know, like back in the early 90s, late 80s. It was kind of like
noteworthy composer
software. It was really, you know, so you look at some of this old stuff, like there's ledger lines all the way across the page because you couldn't figure out how to get rid of it, you know, all this weird stuff. And there were no real edits to it. They just wrote it as they saw it. So there were a lot of mistakes and stuff in there. So anyway, they were going to record this stuff. They were like, okay, we found this stuff, you know, we're going to record it. Well, then lo and behold, politics or whatever, like you said on their page, like the band broke up. So they split went into Beck's and then the 28th. So the long story short, they never had the opportunity to do it. So this music had been sitting around for 30 years. And Jeff, the guy who plays in our group, you know, I said to him, I knew this music was out there. I said, well, talk to Tom, see if, you know, we've got period instruments, everybody can kind of play, see if he'd be interested in letting us record it. And if he's agreeable, I'll, you know, photocopies have been made for better or for worse, whether you're supposed to do that or not. But I figured it had been in an attic for hundreds of years. So they had scanned it before. So it wouldn't
copyright has expired.
Right. Well, I mean, just, I don't know if like that, like degrades the paper or whatever. I don't know, you know. But like I said, it was in an attic, so it's not like, you know. Anyway, that happened before I got a hold of it anyway. So we got the copies of it, and I said, you know, if you guys are cool, if he's cool with it, you know, have him come sit in and play on the recording. I won't play. I'll just go ahead and conduct it so that there's somebody up in front. He can play the tuba part. I don't care. And if he lets us do it, that'd be great. I'll get with Yari, and Yari can once over it, and he can put it into, you know, modern music notation software. And also he can edit out any of the bloopers that are in there, you know, or at least, you know, have a high degree of certainty of what their intention was, but maybe wasn't written correctly, if that makes sense.
Yeah,
you know,
definitely.
These old things are, you know, and it's all handwritten anyway. So he was cool with it. You know, so we paid Yari one band guy who's another band director, he took a shot at a couple of the charts and put them into notation for us too and edited them. And that's how it came about. So in order to pay for it, I just put on Facebook. I was like, look, because it's expensive. I mean, Yari's a friend, but I mean, that's work to go through those things and do the thing. You know, I don't expect somebody to do that for free. And he's like, he's one of the guys in the hobby that, like, you know, people, when he does something, it has a little bit of weight to it. You know, he knows his stuff. So we asked for donations online, and people were very generous. So we were able to pull it off.
Nice.
And then one of the guys has all the recording equipment. So we found a local church and recorded a bunch of the stuff. We didn't have enough money to get the entire book done at the time, but subsequently over the past couple of years since we've done it, we have gotten the entire book done.
Yes.
So that's going to be our next recording is going to be doing a full Hazelton thing with all the music. In addition, I think we're going to maybe do a Christmas CD. I'm not sure of like
cool.
Victorian era Christmas music.
Yeah.
But that's the recording. And now something you might find interesting is this Hazelton Liberty Band. They're still in existence today. The Hazelton Band is a community band that still is in Hazelton, and their lineage is directly from this Hazelton Liberty Band.
Oh, wow.
So they're still in existence. And the thing that's really interesting is that they still own all the original instruments from the Civil War era band.
Nice.
They still have them. Now, what was weird is when we were doing all this, I kind of reached out to them and didn't get a whole lot of feedback from them. Like, it was kind of weird. I don't, in their defense, I only did it online, and I don't know.
Yeah.
Maybe they weren't tech savvy, the people that, because I think their website is attached to like a local hardware store's website. Like, if you go on that site, there'll be like a little link, Hazelton Band, and you have to click on that to get to where you're going, because I think one of the guys owns the local hardware store that's in the band. So they must have been like, we'll just use this website. It's like this weird, like convoluted thing to get any kind of information. So nothing really came of it, but I know that there was a point where they had their own hall, and there was a possibility of them losing that hall. But in this hall, they had like all the instruments on display.
Yeah. Well.
So I hope that, that they didn't decide if they lost their hall, that they were going to like decide to play, get rid of the instruments, is that and the other thing. Because I know that initially when the 28th Pennsylvania was going to do the recording, they had approached them and said, look, we want to do this recording. You lend us all the instruments. We'll have them repaired. Because I don't think they were all in great playing shape, if at all. Mm-hmm. We'll have them reconditioned, and we'll do the recording on those instruments of that music. Mm-hmm. And they kind of like hem and hawed, I think the Hazelton group did. And the story I got from when they tried to do it, like in that early 90s when they were doing it, all that Hazelton, I guess maybe the community band had really kind of fallen on hard times as far as membership goes. They didn't have many. And they were more or less, they were more wanting to get the people in the 20th Pennsylvania to come out and be regular members of the Hazelton Band. Mm-hmm. And that just was not, they were in two different spots. That's not what they had envisioned. Mm-hmm. So I think that it being that, today to have an actual band's original books and their original instruments still in existence, I think there are one or two bands in existence. I don't know if the 26th North Carolina is one of them, that they still have their instruments and their books. And there's one other one, it might be in Virginia, where those two things still exist.
Yeah, there's the Staunton Band.
That's it. Where are they out of?
Staunton, Virginia.
That is the one. Okay, that's the Virginia.
They're the Stonewall Brigade Band.
Okay, that's it. Yeah.
So that's all the same. Yeah, and then the 26th, they are still the Winston-Salem community band. So they're still there, and I think they have like one or two of the instruments, and then like Sam Mickey's cornet, I think, is with the Moravian Foundation. I think they have it. So the 26 instruments are kind of all over the place, but
they do have some of them.
Yeah, they have it. They have at least the tuba, I think.
Okay.
The over-the-shoulder tuba.
So Hazelton is the other one, and not a lot of people know about the Hazelton Band.
Were you able to date the music?
What's weird is in the books, we weren't able to date the music, but some of the music in the books, because, some of the titles you would find in other places, because I saw that was one of your questions about, what about specific about this is different from other bands' books. And some of the music was post-Civil War. The titles were post-Civil War. So I know that, and I guess nobody really knows, like, I mean, those guys, it's a possibility they brought these books back after the war, and then they just continued to write out charts after the war to put in the books. So we weren't able to, we know that they were in the Civil War, that this band did go off, and these are their books, and a lot of these tunes are Civil War era. So we know, like, it dated to the Civil War, but we don't know anything about post-Civil War. Some of the stuff is post-Civil War that's in the...
Gotcha. Do you know
So,
who is the band attached to? Do you recall?
it was a small community band in 1859. They were a coal mining band. And it says here September 13th, 1861, the band enlisted and became the regiment band of the 11th Pennsylvania Volunteer Infantry. And then when, 1862, when they booted out majority of the bands, they re-enlisted it in 1864 as part of the 198th Pennsylvania Volunteers.
Okay.
And then in their written history, I know that they marched in that review after the war in DC.
Yeah.
The band did march that because in one of the things that I read, I forget what the tune was, but it was like a specific Hazelton tune, like that the townspeople knew the band for. And, I guess there were townspeople from Hazelton there, and they got all jacked up when they heard, coming down the street, they heard like their tune, and they were like, "Oh, it's our band. They were playing." So I know for sure,
awesome.
in the oral history of the, of the band that they were down there. So
That's such a interesting thing that I know Steven and we've talked about a few times, that like we want to explore it more on this show, is just all these handful of community bands in the country that do have that pre or during war history and continue to exist in some form, because like the band that I played with on Long Island growing up is only celebrating its 75th anniversary this year or last year. Yeah, it's a baby band compared to like what Steven played in a group that was, a regimental band during the war and existed beforehand. And then knowing all the ones that we previously mentioned, like I guess the Hazelton band, but then also Stoughton and Winston-Salem, and there's got to be countless others that still have some lineage, going back to that time. It's just so interesting, and it'd be interesting to see what current members, either just like regular bands people of the bands, or if they have a historian or a director, like gauging what their knowledge is of that kind of history.
Yeah, I know that the Perseverance band, the band that I grew up playing with in Lebanon, they know that they had a Civil War history, but not much about what happened before. And actually, I'm on their website now, and their website says that they were founded as the 93rd Regimental Band, but I think that's not true, because I know the Historical Society has meeting minutes and budget books from a few years previous to the Civil War. So I think they were like a firehouse band, Perseverance Firehouse or Hose Company or whatever they call it, but it's a fire station. And that's how it started. And then, like you were saying before, along with many other bands in the Northeast and in the South, they enlisted with the local, regiment.
Whoever went it, local regiment. Yep.
Can you talk maybe just a little bit about the research of the community bands in New Jersey that you were able to do the research on, and maybe start with why this became a project for you?
Well, I was born and raised and grew up here in Salem County, and knowing I caught the bug for this history of bands, Civil War, and I know studying, doing research with just the Civil War stuff, that almost every small community had a band, back during the Victorian era. And had never seen anything on what it was like around here where I live. And I play in two different groups that are specific to this county. I play with our local American Legion Band out of Salem, and I play with a brass group called the Salem County Brass Society, which is, they didn't come about till the 70s, but I know like the Salvation Army, or not Salvation Army, the American Legion Band came about once, the guys came back from World War II, they started the band. So anyway, I had started playing with this American Legion band, and there was a gentleman there named Noel Kemp, and he had gone to the local historical society some years ago and like photocopied everything he could find that mentioned band in the county.
Mm-hmm.
So he had all this with the intention. He was involved with the historical society. He was going to, you know, start this series when they send out their quarterly newsletter about like maybe a blurb about specific bands in the county or music in the county, but he never was able to get around to do it. So I knew he had it. So I asked him, I said, hey, do you mind, can I check this stuff out? I like the history of bands, this, that. And he's like, sure. So he sent me home from rehearsal with like this Acme bag full of documents that he had and pictures. And I looked at it, I'm like, this is great material that no one knows about. Nobody has heard of these bands. Like, you know, nobody knows, like, and there was this one specific man, Charles E. Glaspie, that like, I call him the founder of the feast of bands in our little area here in Salem County. Like he started like 4 or 5 bands and like became a local band director. And that, you know, before they were having true music programs in schools, like he was a real pioneer in this area. And had never heard of him. And especially with me being like a band director in the county, because I teach in the county also in Salem County. So that I, you know, and I consider myself a little bit knowledgeable about that stuff. So anyway, I went back to Noel and said, do you mind if I start put this stuff together and maybe, you know, think about doing a book? And that was in January. He's like, nah, take it. I never was able to get around to do it. And if somebody can do it, that would be fine. So I was like, okay, I've never done this before. And it's a lot of information. So it was like, it was all like learning by rote, like the way I was going to do things and trying to get people that like, so that this edited. I never, who do you go to edit your book when it's just like a little history book? And so all that kind of stuff was learning along the way. But so that was January. I took all the stuff. And then in March, everything closed down. That's when COVID hit. So so like that kind of gave me an opportunity to take all that stuff he had given me and kind of like get it into some kind of an order. So, and then when that happened, I don't know if you guys are familiar, there's an awesome resource online. It's a paid resource, but it's called newspapers.com.
Yeah, that helped
like,
get me through my dissertation.
Oh my God. Like, is that like not one of the coolest like resources ever?
Yeah.
Now, they don't have like the yokel newspaper stuff on here for us, but they do have like the Philadelphia Inquirer, the Wilmington Times, which is Wilmington, Delaware, right across the bridge from us. And I think the neighboring county, Cumberland County, they have some of their newspapers, and Camden County, out of Camden City. So I found that was kind of cool is like, I think that a lot of these newspapers would like, I don't know how it worked then, but anyway, they would like copy the same stories in their newspaper from like other local newspapers. So this on newspapers.com, you could find stuff about the local bands from these papers that they did have. It didn't have to necessarily be the local paper. So, and it was great because all I had to do, I just simply started out. They have a search engine just for people that have never used it or whatever. You know how it works. It's just like a Google search. Like, so I would go to the search engine, put in Salem County, New Jersey bands, and then it would like, you would get like this huge amount, and then you would just, and it would like yellow highlight, you know, so you could go through each article and find out what it was. And a lot of them were duplicate articles, but you still had to check it out just in case it wasn't. So it was tedious, but the information is out there. So through those 2 resources of what Noel had given me, plus using this newspapers.com, I was able to put this thing together in roughly about a year and get it out. And like a lot of like my local bandmates that play in the local bands and stuff are into it. And I know you had asked a question on the thing about, you know, what did I find interesting about this that I didn't know before, or maybe that I thought was really interesting. And if you look at a lot of these names, like I actually went through and did an index for the book for names. And you look at last names, some of them there are like, and they're not like Smith or Brown, like common last names. Like they're like these family last names where they, you know, there's like a long list of these last names through different generations, some with like juniors, you know, or those kinds of things. So a lot of these bands, I found that a lot of these players were playing in a lot of different bands at the same time. Like they weren't just, if I knew there was a band in Pennsville, which is a town next to us, and I live in Alloway, like I may play in my town band, but you know, they rehearse on Tuesday nights, so I'm going to go over and play there on Tuesday, and then Wednesdays I'm going to go down in Salem and play. So a lot of these guys all were in the same, you know, they were not a lot of musicians, but the musicians that were there were playing in a lot of different groups to make up these different bands, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
And beyond that, a lot of the, like, I know me playing in this American Legion band, there are many people in that band that have grandfathers and great grandfathers that played in these bands. So it also, I found that sort of interesting that like that lineage continued on, you know, or, you know, they may have, you know, they may like have, I don't, you know, they may have like instruments sitting at home that they didn't know was a great grandfather's or something, you know. I know somebody was going to donate, it was a snare drum and, no, I'm sorry, it was a cornet and a music stand and some other, like a lyre, these kinds of things. And it was, last name was Surface, Serfass. So I said, okay, this was when I was a band director. And I took it, you know, people don't know where it came from, this, that, and the other thing. And so I took it, we used it, the kids use it as an extra, you know, if somebody forgot their instrument, I had a cornet, you know, the trumpet, you know, you're not getting out of playing today. Here, I have this for you. Just clean out the mouthpiece and you're still, you know, Mr. Ludlam, blah, blah, blah. But anyway, so, so it has Surface written all over it. I didn't put two and two together. I'm doing this book, and in the bands, like from the early 1900s, here is this Richard Surface was a cornet player in this band, and like the one that gave me the thing, she had no clue. I think that you know, that her grandfather, and she did have a clue because I reached out to her because I knew her from high school. I said, "Did you know your grandfather? Was his name Richard? Was he the?" And she kind of like was indignant. Well, what do you? Of course I did. Don't you remember? I gave you that cornet with his name on it. I knew he was in a band. I was like, oh well, if you have any picture, you know, like then I went the whole, you know, do you know anything about it? So, you know, it's. I just think that's kind of fun, you know, to see the generations wise that you know, there's still a lot of people are keeping music relevant as part of their family legacy.
Yeah. Definitely.
That's really
cool. By doing this research and going through the process of writing this book, did it give you any ideas of anything you might want to move on to next now that this one is bound and available for purchase?
Yeah, I think the one thing, I was just talking about this the other day with some friends, the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to hit the public school bands of Salem County.
Okay, nice.
So, and then like with the hopes that when that's finished, I can kind of like put the two together into some kind of cohesive.
What are you thinking you might find? Like, are you gonna see like the World War I, World War II kind of time of when public school band programs started exploding, kind of thing? Yeah,
and teaching at Woodstown, I've already started the process because I know my first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to get. Luckily, I have a decent relationship with a lot of the different school districts here because I taught at one of the other school districts and went to high school there. So I know the principals pretty well at a lot of these school districts. So first thing I'm going to do is get into their library and get into their yearbooks. Like I know, for instance, Woodstown, I think 5 years ago or so, we celebrated our 100th anniversary. The high school did. So that was like the early 1900s. So I, even in their yearbooks, like I went back into the Woodstown because that's where I was and looked in the 1920s. I think that was their earliest yearbook they had. And even it has something as simple, it's not a band and the programs hadn't taken off, but like you would find like these things, like they had like a mandolin ensemble, you know, something that we would think of, that's kind of weird, but like it wasn't weird.
Maybe like a glee club or something too.
Yeah. Well, I'm being a band guy, I'm not going to get too like into like string programs and vocal stuff because I think that could like open it up into a thing.
That's very true.
I just kind of want to stay like, but exactly, like before music programs were like what we think of traditional music programs, like after World War I and World War II.
Yeah,
so that's what I think the next thing is going to be.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Or I might watch a lot of TV. I don't know.
Yeah, there you go.
There's always something cool on TV. So
there's a lot of stuff coming out on Disney Plus, so you can always check all that
and
stuff.
I'm a Star Wars guy, so like
there you go. Oh man, they have like they got like 6 or 7 shows coming out. So.
The Book of Boba Fett, like that's what I'm talking about. You know,
there you go.
I'm not digging Civil War bands. I'm digging like the intergalactic Civil War. You know what I mean?
Yeah, the Cantina Band. Right?
That's right.
Yeah.
So this book that you wrote, Jim, is this available on your website, or is this for...
that can be the ludlambrass.com also. Yeah.
Okay, awesome. We'll be sure to include links to your website, and if there's more direct links available, we'll include those also on our website, on our show notes. I think I already have your CD linked on our discography page.
Okay,
but we'll be able to give people easier access to that, and on YouTube we'll include links in the description there as well.
Yeah, Jim, this has been a great conversation. We really thank you for your time on a Friday morning here. We know it's valuable, even though COVID is still a thing, and so we definitely thank you for your time. And you kind of plugged stuff, as we were going through. But where's a good place to point people to if they want to learn more about anything? Either the album that we mentioned, the book that you mentioned, or the Fort Delaware Cornet Band, any of that stuff.
Yeah, the best place where that information is, it's our website is Ludlam Brass, and that's LUDLAM brass.com. So it's not Ludlam like the author, it's spelled with an A instead of a U. So a lot of times we get, people, I can't find you guys. Well, because you spelled it wrong.
Yeah.
WDLA as in Amy, M brass.com.
Yeah. Cool. We'll make sure we have that linked in the show notes and the description and everything. You said like the author, but you are an author technically.
That's true.
Published books.
Like the wealthy author, not the me author.
Great. All right, Jim. Well, thank you so much. It was a pleasure and an honor getting to talk to you, and like I said, looking forward to hanging out and talking more in the future.
Sounds good.
Definitely. Thanks a lot.
All right. Thanks, guys. Take care.
Yeah.
Thank you again so much to Jim Ludlam for coming on the Early American Brass Band podcast. We really hope that you all enjoyed that conversation, and go on our show notes to get links to his website to be able to check out more about the groups that he plays with, and to be able to purchase his CD and book.
Our featured album for this episode is one we mentioned in the body of the episode, Down in a Coal Mine, music of the Hazelton Liberty Brass Band. They recorded this and released it in 2019. And like we said in the episode, the CD contains songs that were exclusive to the Hazelton Liberty Brass Band library that someone found in an attic. So that's a very unique story there. And so we're grateful that they took the time to clean this music up and record it. So we'll have links to that on our show notes for this episode. And you can, if you'd like to follow the show, you can do that on all social media platforms and YouTube. That way you don't miss anything that we put out or any exciting stuff that we decide to post about, pictures and whatnot. It's great. It's a fun time over on social media.
Music for this episode was provided by the 8th Green Machine Regiment Band from Fairfax, Virginia's George Mason University, and the Fort Delaware Cornet Band.
Thanks for listening. We hope to see you in the next one.